so the people find them sparing in the extreme with regard to redress.
When abstract rights return to haunt the revolutionary government, when people schooled in those rights deny obedience to the new government, what will happen? That new government will respond with violence.
When the peasants give you back that coin of sophistic reason on which you have set your image and subscription, you cry it down as base money, and tell them you will pay for the future with French guards and dragoons and hussars.
Thus did Edmund Burke predict that the French Revolution, however noble in its inception, would end in despotism, violence, and chaos. Reflections on the Revolution in France is remembered as a powerful indictment of radical revolutions. This is precisely what Edmund Burke intended it to be. Edmund Burke was ill-informed about many particulars of the French Revolution, and virtually no modern historian would accept Burke's argument that the later violence of the Revolution was somehow a logical unfolding of its abstract principles. This probably would not have bothered Burke to any great extent. He was building, so to speak, a general theory of revolution, and such general theories, he would be the first to admit, are difficult to apply to complex events. After Reflections was published, Burke conceded its historical inaccuracy, but denied this detracted from his basic arguments. This may seem curious unless we understand what motivated Burke to write his book. His primary concern was not the French Revolution per se, but its possible effects on the political scene in England. English reformers looked to the French Revolution as a model, and Burke feared they would undermine the British Constitution. This frightened Burke, and he wrote his masterpiece to shore up revolutionary currents at home. The opening shots of the French Revolution had been fired on July 14, 1789, when the Bastille was stormed and captured by the people of Paris. As events unfolded, Burke became increasingly critical of the French Revolution. But his intense opposition was sparked when English dissenters, Unitarians, Congregationalists, Baptists, and others, began praising the Revolution and looking to it for inspiration. The English Revolution of 1688 was commemorated every year by the Society for the Commemoration of the Glorious Revolution, better known as the Revolution Society. The members of this society, dubbing themselves Friends of Civil and Religious Liberty, favored repeal of legal restrictions against dissenters, and they agitated for parliamentary reform. They were inspired by the French Revolution, which promised religious liberty, and they hoped the French Revolution signaled the dawn of a liberal era throughout Europe. The speaker for the annual meeting in 1789 was the distinguished Unitarian minister Dr. Richard Price, a mathematician and philosopher well known for his defense of the American Revolution some years before. Price delivered a lecture, Discourse on the Love of Our Country. The significance of Price's sermon, published afterwards as a pamphlet, was not his praise of the French Revolution, but his effort to link events in France to the principles of the English Revolution of 1688, and to outline the implications of the French Revolution for current English politics. This is the aspect of Price's sermon that so infuriated Edmund Burke and prompted him to write Reflections on the Revolution in France. Richard Price was foursquare in the 18th century Enlightenment, with its stress on reason, education, natural rights, and government by consent. A true English patriot, Price argued, will seek to enlighten his country through education.
Our first concern, as lovers of our country, must be to enlighten it. Why are the nations of the world so patient under despotism? Why do they crouch to tyrants and submit to be treated as if they were a herd of cattle? Is it not because they are kept in darkness and want knowledge? Enlighten them, and you will elevate them. Show them they are men, and they will act like men. Give them just ideas of civil government, and let them know that it is an expedient for gaining protection against injury and defending their rights, and it will be impossible for them to submit to governments which, like most of those now in the world, are usurpations on the rights of men, and little better than contrivances for enabling the few to oppress the many.
First, there was the American Revolution, and then, 13 years later, the French Revolution, both inspired by the rights of man. Price was ecstatic. Surely mankind is witnessing a new dawn of liberty.
What an eventful period is this! I am thankful that I have lived to see it, and I could almost say, Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, for mine eyes have seen thy salvation. I have lived to see a diffusion of knowledge, which has undermined superstition and error. I have lived to see the rights of man better understood than ever, and nations panting for liberty, which seem to have lost the idea of it. I have lived to see 30 millions of people, indignant and resolute, spurning at slavery, and demanding liberty with an irresistible voice, their king led in triumph, and an arbitrary monarch surrendering himself to his subjects. After sharing in the benefits of one revolution, I have been spared to be a witness to 2 other revolutions, both glorious. And now, methinks, I see the ardour for liberty catching and spreading, a general amendment beginning in human affairs, the dominion of kings changed for the dominion of laws, and the dominion of priests giving way to the dominion of reason and conscience.
Price ends his sermon with a warning to oppressive governments.
Tremble, all ye oppressors of the world! Take warning, all ye supporters of slavish governments and slavish hierarchies! Call no more absurdly and wickedly reformation, innovation. You cannot now hold the world in darkness. Struggle no longer against increasing light and liberality. Restore to mankind their rights, and consent to the correction of abuses, before they and you are destroyed together.
Richard Price died shortly after delivering this sermon, but even had he lived, there was little chance he would have been prosecuted by the British government for sedition. English opinion at this time was favorably disposed to the French Revolution. English liberals, like the politicians Fox and Sheridan, admired its principles, whereas conservatives, even if they despised the threat to monarchy, believed the revolution would weaken France militarily and so benefit England in the unending struggle for power among European nation-states. But Edmund Burke was different. Price's sermon convinced him there existed a clear and present danger to the British system of government. The English Constitution, according to Burke, was not based on the principles laid down by Price. It was not based on natural rights, on the consent of the people, or on the right of revolution. The only legitimate rulers, according to Richard Price, are those who rule by the consent of the people. This doctrine, Burke insists in his reflections, is illegal and unconstitutional.
This doctrine is applied to the prince now on the British throne. Either is nonsense, and therefore neither true nor false, or it affirms a most unfounded, dangerous, illegal, and unconstitutional position. According to this spiritual doctor of politics, if His Majesty does not owe his crown to the choice of his people, he is no lawful king. Now nothing can be more untrue than that the crown of this kingdom is so held by His Majesty. Therefore, if you follow their rule, The King of Great Britain, who most certainly does not owe his high office to any form of popular election, is in no respect better than the rest of the gang of usurpers, who reign, or rather rob, all over the face of this our miserable world, without any sort of right or title to the allegiance of their people.
Burke suggests a dark conspiracy by Richard Price and other dissenters. They really favor a revolution in England and are attempting to lay the groundwork by first gaining acceptance for their subversive principles.
The propagators of this political gospel are in hopes their abstract principle, their principle that a popular choice is necessary to the legal existence of the sovereign magistracy, would be overlooked whilst the King of Great Britain was not affected by it. In the meantime, the heirs of their congregations would be gradually habituated to it, as if it were a first principle admitted without dispute. For the present, it would only operate as a theory, pickled in the preserving juices of pulpit eloquence, and laid by for future use. By this policy, whilst our government is soothed with a reservation in its favour, to which it has no claim, the security which it has in common with all governments, so far as opinion is security, is taken away.
Throughout most of his political career, Edmund Burke was a friend to liberal causes, and though a staunch supporter of the established Church of England, he sympathized with the efforts of dissenters to gain their civil rights. As the French Revolution progressed, however, and as many dissenters applauded its development, Burke turned against the dissenters with a vengeance. He called for governmental suppression of dissenting organizations and publications. The dissenters, he claimed, are not confined to a theological sect. They are a political faction as well, and their principles threaten England with revolution and bloodshed. In 1792, in a speech before the House of Commons, Burke opposed easing legal restrictions against dissenters, and his hatred of them was evident.
These insect reptiles, whilst they go on only caballing and toasting, only fill us with disgust. If they get above their natural size, and increase the quantity whilst they keep the quality of their venom, they become objects of the greatest terror. A spider in his natural size is only a spider, ugly and loathsome, and his flimsy net is only fit for catching flies. But good God! Suppose a spider as large as an ox, and that he spread cables about us. All the wilds of Africa would not produce anything so dreadful.
Burke condemns dissenting clubs like the Revolutionary Society as a pernicious foreign faction seeking to overthrow the British government. The government should move against them.
If the danger be existing in reality, and silently maturing itself to our destruction, what? Is it not better to take